We good, Justin?
Almost. We are now live.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We'll begin our discussion reference the 2022 Capital Investment Community Development Program for the City of Akron. We will be reviewing economic development, housing, community services, miscellaneous, parks and recreation, transportation. And then next Monday at 4 o'clock, we'll be reviewing the water and sewer portion of the budget, if that's correct. But that's the procedures.
Councilor Fusco, that would be on January 24th.
Okay.
Next
Thank
Monday.
You, Helen, for catching that. Thank you very much. Want to make sure everybody's aware. Thank you. On the 24th, we'll be reviewing the utilities portion of the budget itself. So anyways, with that, what we'll do is we'll get a presentation on perhaps 3 or 4 items. And then what we'll do is we'll ask for input or questions from any council members. First, I'd like to kick it over to Sean Volleman, and then he can make any introductions, or we can begin the process. Sean?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Councilman. Just I pulled over so I could have my camera on and say hi. Now this has been a learning activity for me over the last couple months, and getting to understand the capital budget and the giant amount of work that goes into preparing for something like this. And looking forward to these discussions, and really, just my thanks to Helen and Jim and Hector and Alyssa and whoever else I may be forgetting that have helped get us to this point. And with that, I will get it back over to Helen.
Okay, Helen Tomic, you will be leading us in this discussion, and we look forward to it. So Helen, take it away.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I wanted to start off by thanking the mayor for his guidance and persistent reminders that we need to be very mindful and fiscally responsible in the resources that we are looking to expend in 2022. This is a responsibility that we have taken seriously as we move forward to improving our city services and infrastructure. Also, I want to thank City Council members for the opportunity to provide an overview of our 22 capital budget. And additionally, I want to thank City staff. We started this process back in June of 2021, and it's been a long process. Each year, OID Long Range Planning staff prepares an annual capital budget for your review. We solicit requests from city staff. We solicit requests from city council. We started that process, like I said, in June. Once we get all of those requests, we sit down, we review them. We meet with each department, each division, and thoroughly have discussions about the proposed projects. So what you have before you is a compilation of that work. The budget before you is for fiscal year January 2022 through December 31st, 2022. We will be presenting 5 segments today: economic development, housing, parks, recreation, public facilities, and transportation. A lot of material to cover. So after each segment is complete, as Councilman Fusco indicated, when we complete the economic development section, we would ask for questions then, housing, parks and recreation, and moving forward. January 24th, as Councilman Fusco indicated, will be the second part of the presentations, where we will focus on water and sewer. So we will try to answer all of your questions. In some instances, we will not be able to answer those questions tonight. So we would respectfully request that you submit your questions to us in writing, and then we will get a response to you by the time we ask for passage of this budget. Having said that, I will start the PowerPoint presentation. And after 18 months of Zoom calls, you would think that we would be experts in this, but I can't take responsibility. So do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
So now how do we start from the beginning? There we go. Okay. So I wanted to start off with just a general overview. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do.
Helen, if,
Yes.
the one thing before we begin, I wanted to mention this to everybody that this has been sent to everyone, the actual.
Correct. Mhm.
Okay, so everybody should have this available to them as well.
Correct. The actual budget was sent to council December 29th, and the PowerPoint presentation, Sarah, that should be on their iPads.
Yes, I forwarded that
Okay.
as an email, and it's also added in Agenda Manager.
That's the piece I wanted, was to make sure that this presentation is in a email format so that the council has access to that as well. So thank you.
So the 2022 capital budget looks at to be approximately $353 million. This is a little bit of a decrease, about $30 million less than what we had in 2021. That's primarily attributed to some sewer and water projects, and we can discuss those at a later time. Looking globally at the budget, we have about 47% in terms of revenue. 47% of the funds are coming from the state, 28% from local funds, and 21% from federal funds. In comparison to 2021 and 22, you will see that, and from the local perspective, we have budgeted a little bit less in 2022, about $3 million less, or $3.2 million. In state funds, as Councilman Malik noted, we did have a significant decrease of about 27%, or $63 million in state funds, and that is primarily attributed to sewer projects. And I'll get into that a little bit more detail later. Federal funds, we have an increase of almost $36 million, which is almost a 97% increase, and that is attributed primarily to ARPA funds. The third slide in the presentation kind of breaks down the different revenue sources, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, but this one looks at the larger ones. We're looking at about $15 million in income tax, $51 million in income tax, $19 million in sewer capital funds, and about $14 million in general debt. Looking at the state budget, there are significant changes here in Ohio Department of Transportation. There is, it represents, the $50 million represents about 30% of the budget of $166 million. Those include projects such as the Goodyear Bridge and the Akron Beltway project, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail later. The other significant portion of this budget is $48 million of water pollution control funds. This is also about $30 million, or 30% of the state budget. It is a decrease from previous years. Projects here include examples like the Ohio Canal and Scepter Tunnel, the Hawkins distribution sewer lines, and the Headway tunnel as well, Headworks tunnel as well. And then the final one is the water supply revolving loan account. This is also about 29% of the $166 million. And this primarily is going towards the fixed network advanced meter systems, which we'll be discussing next week.
Now, can you go back to the previous slide,
Sure.
the one before this one?
This one? Yes.
The one before this one, I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the next section is the federal revenue portion. We're anticipating about $73 million in federal revenue. Part of this is the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Funds, and the other segment I wanted to mention is community development. So I will qualify community development or community development block grant funds. What we are discussing in today's budget is only going to be an estimate. Congress has not passed the 22 budget yet. So at this time, we don't know when, we don't know how much money we will be receiving. If the past holds true, we'll probably find out sometime in March or April. And then once we develop the consolidated plan, that will come back to council in June or July. The other section of the budget does specify minimal funds in regional revenue summaries, and this is primarily JED money, some resources from the city of Talmadge, and some resources from Summit County. Finally, on the private side, we're anticipating about $10 million. This is special assessments. And the other private funds, I believe there is some going towards some economic development projects. On the expenditure side, so we talked about the revenue side of $353 million of where the money is coming from. On the expenditure side, this is where how the money will be spent. So as you can see, primarily of the $353 million, 42% of that is going towards water and sewer funds, projects. 26% is going towards transportation projects. So the 42%, the water and sewer, we'll be talking about that next in 2 weeks. So what we did then is the items we will be discussing today is further broken out for you. It's about $205 million. So that's about 45% of that $205 million is going towards transportation projects. 12.2% is going towards parks and recreation. About 19% is debt service. So that's previous debt or debt where we have issued debt for projects in the past, and now we have to pay on that. And about 5.6% of that is economic development. And I think I have one final screen in terms of expenditures. So this kind of looks at the items we're discussing today, comparing $21 and $22. 22 is in blue, 21 is in green. So you can tell there's a little bit of discrepancy or decrease in transportation. There is an increase in housing and community development, and then another significant increase is parks and recreation. And we'll be going through all of those throughout the presentation today. The final item is issue 4 money. This is looking at our safety and streets budgets. And we are anticipating about $15 million in collections for this year, split evenly between Akron Public Service Department, Akron Police Department, and the Akron Fire Department. And I believe this was shared with you as well. If not, it is in this PowerPoint presentation, but all of these items will be discussed throughout the presentation this afternoon as well. And you can ask questions should you have any. So having said that, we will start off with economic. So any questions today?
Yeah, questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. I'm going to ask if there's any questions. I see Mr. Malik's hand is up. Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Tomei. With regard to the private funds, what are the revenue sources there?
Well, that would be from outside sources. It could be from foundations, or it could be for individuals as well. But it's not in the category of what I mentioned. It's not federal funds. It's not state funds. So primarily donations or funds coming in from foundations.
Okay. Can we get kind of a listing of that?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Helen, what's the and we haven't had an update from our from the folks from the Guidehouse, but in terms of the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill, is that reflected at all in here? I know that it's still being kind of worked out, I assume, but where does that play in terms of our 22 budget, or does it?
So I am not familiar with any of the, how the resources will be spent or can be spent. We're still waiting on final guidance. So I do know as those funds become available and we know what the criteria is, we will be looking to make adjustments in the capital budget to reflect what is eligible under the infrastructure bill.
Because obviously that would be something that would be a profound impact on this capital budget.
Yes, yes, yes.
In a lot of different ways. And so I think that would be important for us to get an update if possible, like where it's at and what the expectations are. So very good. Thank you. I see Ms. Mobian's hand is up. Linda Mobian.
Can we go back a couple slides? I want to look at the housing piece.
This one
Right there. Go back.
right here.
Right here.
Mhm.
Is that 9.7% for housing?
So yes, that's the $19 million represents 9.7% of the 205 million of this portion of the budget.
Do we have a breakout of how we are proposing to spend those? That's going to be discussed today?
Correct.
Okay.
A large
So that
chunk of
represents
that, a large chunk of that is community development block grant funds. So that's a little bit of a gray area depending on what our allocation is going to be once that's announced in a couple of months.
Do you have in this the repairs and upkeep of older homes that we would like to see dollars go toward?
We do have money in here for housing rehabilitation, correct?
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Tomic, you mentioned American Rescue Plan dollars, and I think there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30.
Yeah, 38 million,
38 million.
correct.
Here's my concern. We receive those dollars for a specific reason. And it's going to be hard to track that through this process. For example, I mean, the dollars came to us because of our poverty rate and our housing instability. We've got $38 million in this project, but only 19 million is for housing. So we've got 38 million ARPA dollars in this project right here.
We have $38 million throughout the capital process. So it's not all housing, yeah.
Yeah, that's what makes it even more concerning, because the dollars came to us because of poverty rate and housing instability. There's no way we're going to be able to track this.
Did we lose him?
I don't know. Mr. Neal, are you frozen? Of course, I know you can't answer that if you are, but
The way they came to us for.
okay,
So,
there you
No, this is, we've got to start this. We've got to understand this now, or else we'll lose it throughout the.
We're missing some of the comments, Mr. Neal.
Got to struggle and see if that 19 is even dealing with, you know, the least of those in our community. So I would like for us.
I'm sorry, Mr. Neal, we're missing about every other sentence or so.
Those dollars.
Sir, we missed most of what you said. I apologize.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to see a separate ledger for the American Rescue Plan dollars. And I would like for this council to come to an agreement on what the metrics are that we should use to make sure that those dollars are expensed the way they came to us for. Were you able to follow what I said? Did my connection stay connected?
We lost quite a bit of what you said. And perhaps if you can say that again, the last piece, what
Okay,
you're
I tell you what,
asking for.
if you don't mind taking Mr. Malik, I'm going to go get my other connection, and I'll just turn this one off. So if you don't mind switching to Mr. Malik, and I'll catch you on the rebound.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Malik.
Thank you. Just wanted to briefly go off of your point, Mr. Chair, about the infrastructure bill. I think obviously we don't know what the specific amounts and programs and possible uses of the funds will be now. But I think before we finish this process over the next month, I think it would be helpful to at least get, you know, an update as to what the current city's current understanding of that bill is, so that at least it can bear on the decisions that we make within this current piece of legislation. And then just briefly to Mr. Neal's point, I'm not sure I agree that I think it's helpful how the ARPA money is broken out here. So I appreciate the way it's been laid out here, as a separate revenue stream. Perhaps if there is something to be done, it's maybe like a one sheet similar to the issue 4 one sheet that at least just shows all of those things on one page. But I do appreciate how it's been laid out here.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Yeah, and I agree. I don't think that's an unreasonable request. Mr. Neal, are you ready? Are you on another? Just briefly, sir, and I apologize. You're on mute.
No problem. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but
Can you
it
hear-
shows that you're on mute, so I don't know.
But can you hear me?
We can
Yes.
hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on a different device. Thank you. Yeah, all I was asking is if we can have a separate ledger that allows us to track the American Rescue Plan dollars and what we're spending them on. And then also for this council, for us to come to an agreement to make sure that we are using the metrics to make sure that we're expending those dollars in a way that they came to us for, which was our poverty rate and housing and stability. If we're spending them on CDBG funds and they're going to develop, new townhouses and things that aren't for, addressing our houseless population, or as to Mr. Mobia's point, if we're not addressing that part of our housing that's distressed, reaching that century mark, and we don't have a home repair program that we're putting in place, I don't think we're meeting the needs that brought those dollars here. So again, just making sure that we have a clear, clean way to track those dollars so that we can make sure that those dollars are being expensed in the way that they came to us.
Got you. Thank you. Yeah, I agree
Thank
that
you.
that should be part of the discussion, and we need to get information about ARPA separate. I have no problem with that, making that request. But from what I understand from the Guidehouse, from their presentations that they have given us, that this is going to be heavily audited, and we got to stay in bounds as much as we possibly can, or we are going to get audited. So that's one of the reasons why they're there, to help us stay in bounds, I guess, and to make sure that we meet the goals of the rescue plan. And so, and that's, we're going to be going over some of that hopefully today, as a matter of fact. So, but a separate sheet is, noted. Thank you very much. So, any other questions or comments in reference to the first few pages before we get into the next section? Okay, hearing none. Let's go ahead, Ms. Tomek, and get into the economic and job development piece.
Okay. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Brad Becker for this section of the presentation.
Thank you. Now, this is on page 4, okay, for those of us following at home. Okay, page 4, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This basically is the economic development, commercial, industrial, and development. I also have Sam DeShazier here to go over a few of these items also. And Sean, actually, Sean, I'm going to have you start with that American History Center.
Happy to. Again, I guess this is the first topic, so if I'm going into too much or too little detail, please let me know. But the plan, there's a plan to create an Akron history in the Bowery complex. This is in conjunction with the city's bicentennial coming up in 2025. We want to create enduring, long-lasting, free museum quality exhibit detailing the history of Akron. I'm told we are the only major city without a location that tells their history, their founding and their growth, social, industrial history. And there has been an entity created named Greater Akron Amenities, a 501c3, to begin creating this museum. It is looking at being about a $1.5 to $2 million project. And they have asked us to contribute a portion of that to this project. And that is what that item is.
Thank you.
Okay, following to the next one is Ascot Parkway improvements. We did full depth repair on the roadway out at Ascot for all the businesses out there in the last year and a half. These are closeout charges. Also with the private entities, they put in fiber optic for the internet. So all these businesses now have the opportunity to use fiber optic to enhance their business growth.
Very good.
Business enhancement grant. This basically is a good crux to the BRE, the business retention and expansion. And we try to use this grant in smaller segments to help businesses to come either into Akron or existing businesses to expand and hire people to help their business grow and develop within the city. So it's great when we can get businesses to come in, but we also want to help the businesses that are here too, whether it's medium or large size businesses with this grant.
Very good.
And then I discussed the curated storefront. That is another entity that is created and run primarily by Rick Rogers. They have, if you've seen all around Akron at times, they, I think some of the more recent ones, if you've noticed the different lights on the top of the old hotel building up on Cascade Plaza that have been going on at nights. Recently, they've installed a display at the Polsky building, which I highly recommend driving by in the evening if you get a chance. But they've also been putting art in storefronts up and down Main Street, and you know, they also were, if you've seen the storage container display up on Furnace by Luigi's. And we are looking to assist with their projects for the upcoming year.
Okay.
And then 655 South Broadway, which is on the corner of Barges and Broadway, right diagonal from the Metro bus terminal. The city owns that building now. The building is in very bad shape. It does not have a roof on it. We're going to end up tearing that building down, and because of its location, it's in a very optimum location for a business to come in, possibly a mixed use retail, or maybe even a small manufacturing facility to go there.
Okay.
Sam, did you want to do the Greater Akron Chamber?
I can. The Greater Akron Chamber's grant of $160,000 is an annual opportunity for us to improve some of the economic well-being of the city. It's reaching mostly into the areas, but corresponding with our regional and state partners. And it's also making sure that we are taking the best efforts to make sure that our industries forge ahead into Industry 4.0 as we go forward. As we know, if we don't innovate, then we get left behind. So we are making sure that we're taking the responsibility to make sure we work with our industries to make that happen. So that is an annual contract that we have with them, and we measure that on an annual basis. And then there's also a report that you'll receive afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
And then the last project is the Rubber Bowl redevelopment. Basically, this funding is going to complete the demolition of the Rubber Bowl structure, as well as the Heisman House in that area. We'll be removing all the turf and all the concrete in the stands. We do have some retaining walls that are needed to stay for George Washington Boulevard, but those will be maintained. And that is another prime location for economic development, whether a manufacturing facility or some type of a venue to come in to create jobs. So we are really excited that we're going to be able to finish this one and hopefully get this on the market.
Okay, very good. Thank you. At this point, I'll ask if there's any questions before we begin the neighborhood business districts. Any questions from anyone? Mr. Malik?
Thank you. The first I want to say really excited to hear about the Akron History Center and especially coinciding with the bicentennial. So look forward to hearing more about that and how we can get engaged with that. The Rubber Bowl redevelopment is this kind of total cost to get us to a place where it's on the market, or are there potential future costs in future years? Because it is a significant amount of money. Obviously, we know how important it is to not have the site be blighted, but just want to get some clarity on that.
No, we should be able to get it to the point to put it on the market. The only other expenses that we would possibly incur would be some additional tap-ins to the sewer and water for whatever company would go there.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
Ms. Allen?
Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters. I'm interested in understanding how these various projects were selected and whether there are underlying or source documents that provide greater detail.
So
Go ahead.
as most, if not all of these, as I indicated in the presentation, we issue what we call a CIP request form. So different divisions submitted these to us. So in terms of, like, for example, Ascot Parkway improvements, that's an infrastructure project that came before council maybe 2 years ago. So we're finishing up those improvements. The Rubber Bowl redevelopment project. That's another one that was perhaps submitted, and I don't have the submissions in front of me. It was either perhaps submitted by engineering and or economic development. We know we have to do this. I mean, it's been an eyesore.
Of course.
Yeah.
And
so we know we have to do that. Yeah.
Sure, Ms. Tomic, and I suppose I should or could at any rate narrow my question. Curated Storefront does not fall within that same category.
It does not. This was a proposal, and actually, to be quite honest, a little bit of it predated my time, but it was a request and a proposal given to us by the Curated Storefront that we thought was a beneficial use of funds. I mean, that's we have what we are a lot of times, what ideas that we have organically and other ideas that come to us from the outside. And I think that would be
sure. I asked because I would anticipate the question from residents, how do I get my idea funded?
Get a hold of,
Yeah.
I got something beeping and that's me, and I apologize. My insulin pump is beeping on me. But I mean, no, I'm sorry. Councilman?
No, I was going to say, the one method is working through the council person.
Yep.
For the CIP, we can request those if we have a constituent or a business out there or something. That's one method of doing it. In terms of the ARPA funds, there's the portal, but yeah. Any other questions or comments?
And I apologize about the well-timed beeping of my pump. No, I mean, but that's a lot of what my office is here for, is to engage in the work, live, play type of activities for the city of Akron, and we're here to listen.
Very good. Thank you. Any further? Good. Tara Mosley?
Thank you, Chairman Fusco. I have a few questions. Helen, if we could go back to this rubber bowl development, redevelopment, and the funds being slated for demolition. I thought this had already been passed in legislation a few years back when Bob Hope was on council with us. So correct me if I'm wrong, because what was that funding for? Because I remember that came about around the same time when we were trying to get something done with Morgan Street, the building on Morgan Street, and they opted to use money to demo the rubber bowl. So I'm just a little taken aback that we are now about to slate $650,000 for redevelopment and demolition, because I thought those funds for demo were already taken care of.
So, Brad,
Yes, I can answer that. The first piece of legislation that came through council, we had an emergency because it was only for a partial demolition of the rubber bowl. And that was the wall that really was adjacent to the soapbox derby. We ended up with a very unsafe condition where some of the wall was falling onto the track. So we had to do something quickly to take out that section of the rubber bowl. And then we promised council at that time that any more money that would be spent to complete the project would come through council again. So basically, that's what this is here.
So if you could unpack a little bit more about construction of park, what exactly does that mean? Because 650,000 just seems like a lot.
and you know, but I will have to look at that description more closely. I think that was, I know, Brett, I think that was for, we took narrative from a couple years ago. I don't believe that this 650 includes anything in terms of construction of a park. I think this is just demolition. And I think that particular sentence is an error on our part.
Yeah, we ended up getting some money from ODNR to help us do the first demolition of the portion next to the derby. And as part of that, we had to construct a little park right next to the derby there, per ODNR. So we ended up doing that. Didn't finish the park yet, but
Okay.
so really, that's correct. It was from the last 2 years ago, I believe,
Yeah.
the budget. So.
Okay, if you could get us an amendment of that, Helen, I'd appreciate
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
And then also, when we talk about these different structures like Broadway and we're talking about demoing, are these structures that are owned by us, the city, or are we having people sign waivers and then we're eating the cost?
No, they are owned by the city.
Okay. Okay. And then lastly, this curated storefronts, are we just talking about downtown Akron storefronts, or are we talking about across the city?
They have they are looking to put in storefronts wherever, that may be available. They have primarily focused on downtown and up on Furnace Street, but, we can get in touch with Mr. Rogers and their group. They're actually located out of Bounce. And I don't know if anyone got the opportunity to see, he had that, I think he called it the Museum of the Weird or something along those lines, that was in the Bowery building over the summer. And, they've been doing a lot of different things, but I don't think that they are stuck on just doing stuff downtown.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Any other questions on the commercial industrial development? Short of that, we'll go ahead and move into the neighborhood business districts.
And this, Mr. Bowman?
Yes, and these are, our Great Streets programs. So, with the first box is the facade matching grants that we do with the businesses in the Great Streets area. Generally, I think that the limit has been $30,000 per business. And, you know, as has been in the news lately, we're adding our newest great street on South Arlington. So these monies will be available to businesses in that area in 2022. The second one is, again, the CD money that we put towards public improvements in the great streets areas as well. You know, I think sidewalks has been a lot of them, and, you know, improvements, beautification type improvements as well, as there's some lovely pictures I see on the PowerPoint. But that's what those two line items are.
Good. And go ahead and go into the small business and neighborhood district, and then we'll ask for questions.
Okay. I can keep going. You know, the Bounce Innovation Hub, this is for the improvements to the second floor. It's estimated about 3.1 million. We are awaiting final determination on a 80% grant from the EDA, which would be crucial to actually getting it done. The rest of it would be funded by JED. The Business Incentives Program, Capital Access Ecosystem, is the Resiliency Fund. Made a presentation on that maybe a couple months ago to City Council. And this would be spending the remainder of our state CD, the CARES Act money.
Yeah, yes. Cdbg
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it out. The next is our Community Development Corporation support. We would put that out to get, you know, projects for the community development corporations. We would be adding additional money from ARPA this year as our proposal. The next one is the Rubber City Match Grants. I think council is familiar with the Rubber City Match Program, but this would be to fund that moving forward. This is, I noticed, you know, for Councilman Malik's comment earlier, this is shown as, you know, 200,000, you know, IT and private. So the reason the private portion of this would be, it's a cash match. So it would be, you know, $200,000 in projects, of which the city would be doing half of that, and the company that's receiving the grant would be putting in the other half. Finally is the Mcat program. Again, we've discussed this the same presentation a couple months ago. They put on, there's a number of aspects to it, part of which is the cohorts that they run to teach small businesses, minority businesses, you know, basically how to succeed. And the other part of it being, you know, a program that we have that can, you know, utilize cash up front that the Western Reserve, and if it's a city contract, that the Western Reserve would front money and then get, so that the contractor can get paid earlier than the normal process for getting paid. And that's what these projects are.
Very good. I see Mr. Malik, your hands up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Volman. Looking at, if we could go back one slide, the money for Bounce. I know a lot of this is a federal EDA grant, which I think is great, you know, in terms of, you know, going after federal money and not having to, you know, use local money for that. I think there is, I think you said about $600,000 in JED money here. I guess, can you kind of talk about, you know, I think I'm a big fan of Bounce. I think the way in which, you know, the current phase of it has worked is working. But there are significant capital expenditures that we make for it, you know, that in previous years and in this year. What does the future look like, right? I mean, are there significant future capital expenses that we're looking at beyond 2022?
I do not know of any off the top of my head. However, that just might because I'm not aware of them. We can get an update, I think, on Bounce in general, you know, moving forward at some point in time you know. in
Yeah,
the
and if we
future.
could maybe check with, Mr. Weintraub and Ms. Sublet and just kind of get, maybe a couple sentences or a paragraph, back in email of what, of what the future capital outlook looks like, just for our understanding.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Mobian?
Thank you. Let me just share with you that part of my concern is, as we do the capital budget this way, I'm really concerned that, and I look at Bounce and I certainly agree with a lot of what they do, and there's no problem with that. I know that we gave them a $3 million building, and I don't know if this has anything to do with that other than trying to help them improve it. But when we don't have the necessary dollars to help upgrade housing, I am particularly concerned that some of these funds that we're giving to Bounce and others, that we can reduce it in order to make sure that there are the funds to address a lot of our housing issues. And I appreciate what Bounce is doing, and I know they've added that minority component that I, insisted on a few years ago, and they are doing some good work. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just looking at the amount of the dollars, and I know that we have decided as a city to use JED funds for economic development. But that's a decision that's pretty much made by the administration as opposed to with council's input, because it doesn't have to be used for businesses and all of that, because we give them all of the JED money pretty much to these kinds of things. And I get a little concerned that we're still not focusing enough on the housing issues that we have in the city and the ways in which we can help those individuals who are staying in their homes, but they cannot afford to upgrade their homes in the manner in which they need to. So I want us to keep that in the back of our minds, because if we could reduce some of these items that we're talking about and put more money in housing, I really want us to think about that. I know economic development is important, creating jobs and all of that, but we also have people that are not able to stay in their homes in a healthy and reasonable manner because they don't have the funds to upgrade them. So I want us to keep that in mind as we go through this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tara Mosley?
Thank you. I'm really echoing what my colleague, Councilwoman Amobian, has stated. Just trying to get an idea of $3 million to improve the second floor. Is that $3 million just for improvements, or is this for other necessary usages at Bounce as well? Because it just seems like a hefty price tag.
Mr. Volleman?
My understanding is that is the estimate to improve the second floor. But again, 80% of that would be, pending a EDA grant.
I would.
Okay.
And that EDA grant is not eligible for housing rehabilitation as well.
Right.
So it's strictly designated for these type of initiatives. So we do understand Councilwoman's points as well, but unfortunately, we cannot utilize those EDA funds for any type of housing projects.
And I think as well shown here, and going forward, as we have put forward in our presentations to council on ARPA, we plan to invest a significant amount of money in helping, basically what you said, helping people stay in their homes. That was one of, Mayor said it at the State of the City, and has said it all along. This is a primary focus of ours, and a primary focus of these funds is to, is housing. That is just a fact. So I'm hoping we can impress you with what we're doing.
I appreciate that and that clarity. My next question is about the Great Streets Facade grants. So the one line item in there says matching grant. So is this sort of kind of like our neighborhood, our Akron grants that we have, where they have to have half the funds and then we match it?
So when we first started the Great Streets program, that was the criteria, a dollar for dollar match. But with the situation as we have before us with COVID and everything else, we do understand that that's a hardship. So we are looking at alternatives. The dollar for dollar match is not feasible right now, but we do feel it's important that they put some money in the project. So it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar. If they can put in $5,000 or $10,000, that would be fine as well.
Okay, so because I'm just thinking about them adding Arlington to the Great Streets District, and as the representative for a greater portion of Arlington Street, also being shared by Councilwoman Connor and Councilman Kamer, I'm trying to visualize how some of these businesses would even be able to afford to even put 5,000 in. I mean, they're barely making it. So when they heard that Great Streets was coming to Arlington, of course, I don't know about my colleagues, but I got flooded with calls. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do we make this work where we actually can have Arlington Street become vibrant again with people who don't have the funds to match it?
And we are, Mark Greer and I have had some discussions. We do understand that that's a hardship. So trying to come up with a mechanism to meet our needs and our requirements, because these are federal funds, but also meet the needs of the business owners, and looking at a project or program that we can make impactful. So we are having those discussions and trying to figure out what we can do to meet their needs, but meet our needs as well. And I'm hoping within the next 2 months, we can come up with something.
Okay. So when you say federal funds, Helen, is it stated within that federal framework that there has to be funds?
There's a match component, but
and it has to be funds. It has to be monetary. It can't be.
Well, it can be, and so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at ways that we can meet that requirement, but also meet the needs of the residents or of the business owners.
Right.
So
I'm just in my mind thinking about how we do things with Habitat for Humanity. The person that's getting the house, they're using sweat equity to help build the house, not just giving it to them. So then they have buy-in. So maybe that's something that you and Mark and I could have a conversation about, because I'm just really concerned about those businesses being able to have those kind of
Understood.
funds.
Understood.
Yeah, we don't want to put people in a position to fail with this opportunity.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have housing coming up next, just an FYI on that piece, as well as well, go ahead, Mr. Malik, and then I'll introduce the housing piece.
I think Ms. Connor has a question that she hasn't had a chance to ask. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see.
Make sure that.
The boxes are really small when we get presentations. Sorry, Ms. Connor.
Thank you, Councilman Malik. I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Councilwoman Mosley said. We've had a difficult time getting Great Streets really launched in Goodyear Heights, because a lot of the businesses there didn't have that matching piece. And because of that, they wouldn't even apply. And I had to go back and tell them, at least apply, because applying at least starts the conversation.
Absolutely.
And that's been a difficulty with breaking in, although Great Streets has done some really good beautification. The planters were just beautiful this year. It doesn't really hit the meat of it, which is providing funds for those businesses. So we're going to try again to at least get them to apply and start the conversation. So thank you for bringing that up, Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Sharon Connor. Shamus Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we could go back one slide. So the Community Development Corporation support these are direct grants to CDCs, or, I mean, it doesn't, I know we talked about funding housing development through ARPA, but this is separate, right?
Correct. So there's $2.3 million allocated here. The $300,000 is our annual CDC support grant category that we've been looking at for the past couple of years through the Community Development Block Grant Program. So the $2 million is additional ARPA funds that we are looking to work with CDCs. They will have to go through an RFP process, and then we'll go from there.
And well, a couple of questions. First, is this new? Because I don't recall this being in our ARPA presentations in the fall.
Trying to, it may not have been. No, very well. I think we looked at part of it as, there's a portion of it as economic development and a portion of it as housing, but we don't have any specific programs at this point in time that we're looking at funding with this portion.
Okay, and I think then that goes to the second question. The $300,000 that we currently give is just kind of general, operating grants to CDCs, if I'm correct. So what would, the RFP process look like? Do we have a sense of how many entities we would like to fund? Obviously, we have some CDCs that are stronger than others. We have some ones that are, in a very growing state. But what is the top? Going from, again, absolutely, respect the work that our CDCs do. Going from $300,000 to $2.3 million is a big jump. And so just trying to get a sense of kind of what the thought process is, what we want to get out of this money.
I will allude to the CDBG portion. So for the CDBG portion, we do require that they have a project with whatever they are applying for. So it's just for discussion purposes and for math purposes, so it's easy for me to figure this out. The cap amount they can ask for is $100,000. So with the CDBG, $25,000 of that can be used towards their operating costs, and then $75,000 of that must be used towards some type of project. So that can be an economic development project. It can be a housing project. So with the CDC, with the ARPA funds, we're still looking at requirements and what would be eligible and what would not be eligible. But I would say a portion of that would be capacity building. And looking at these are opportunities for them to build capacity, and then we can work with them in the future to help us do some of the work that we've been talking around here for housing projects as well.
So it sounds like there's some discussion of some of it would be operational and some of it would be project-based.
Yes, at least for the CDBG portion, that's how we did it. So we'll have to see, what we can and cannot do in terms of the guidance.
Right, which did come out. But I haven't gotten through all 480 pages yet, personally.
I thought it was 437.
430.
Okay.
480 with the 44 page. I think it was 480 printed out with the 44 page summary. That might have been what it was.
Mr. Malik, thank you for those questions. My question though is that if this is going to be a portion of ARPA and portion of CDBG funds, then that legislation would come to council, at least in the total CDBG package legislation that we get, correct?
It would be two separate pieces because we were advised not to mix funds.
Okay, so we would see legislation.
CDBG, yeah.
Okay, and that would just be a portion of those for the CDCs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not their total package. Okay.
Just if I can, Mr. Chair, just based off that point, I understand the CD money we would see it again, but my understanding, this would be our opportunity. We won't see this 2 million under ARPA again. This is the process right now by which to approve that, correct?
Ms. Tomic?
I guess I would say, I think it would depend on what the money is going towards. If it's something that would require separate councilmatic approval anyway, then yes, it would come back. If it wasn't, it would, but at this point, I don't know.
We will, I think we will be coming back to council with updates for CDC, for the ARPA funds. So this would be included in part of those updates.
Yeah, and I guess
Yeah.
and like the point is well taken that, I'm not suggesting that we as council, debate whether a certain organization gets $100,000 or $500,000, what have you, right? What I guess I'm trying to say is that there is some kind of middle ground between, like, we're authorizing the expenditure of $2.3 million for a kind of, currently we're not even at the RFP stage. And, okay, here we're sitting here and determining the nickels and dimes that go to CDCs. It sounds like there should be, at least from my perspective, a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of what we're approving, in the sense that this may be the last time we see this $2 million with respect.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Nancy Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those questions and answers just now. I have a feeling that my question is somehow mixed up in all of that, and I may be being a little bit too dogmatic or something here. I want to just check and see if I heard something right, Ms. Tomic. You may have just been providing a sort of an illustration of something that might be. But again, I just wanted to check. You used an illustration of a CDC receiving $100,000. So is it the case that under this particular item in the budget, that's how this would be, that that issuing money under this element of the budget would be instances where an organization or a project would have a limit of $100,000, or were you just trying to illustrate how this might work?
I was illustrating utilizing the CDBG example. With the ARPA funds, at this point, we don't know if there's going to be a cap of $100,000. It could be significantly higher. So we're still figuring out, what are eligible activities, what that could look like. Sure. And then issuing an RFP process, issuing a criteria of what we would like to see, looking at capacity. So there's still a lot of work ahead of us. But the other thing I wanted to touch on, kind of going back to Councilman Malik's point, so this is just a general capital budget, or just general a general overview. This will also come back when we during the operating budget and appropriating budget as well. So these items will be identified there as well.
Sure.
So you will see that again.
Sure. I guess I did want to share what I understood to be sort of a generalized concern, that in laying out a $2.3 million okay, that we have sort of forecast that that's where we'll go. And, I feel strongly that I share the view, at least preliminarily, that it's early for that, and that's a lot of money. But thank you for explaining and helping me understand. I do appreciate the CDBG guidance, understand that, and I think I was kind of getting lost along the way. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy Holland. Any further questions or comments? If not, we'll move into the housing piece, and appreciate all the comments previously referenced housing. But I just want to note that the 21 capital budget was $10,380,000 for the housing and community services piece. And the 22 budget is for $19,991,000. So that we are seeing almost a doubling of that. And so interested in hearing what we're going to be receiving here. So I do see Ms. Amobian's hand up before we begin.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate you recognizing me. I appreciate that, but we're not for the ARPA dollars, I wouldn't be questioning the amount, because keep in mind, I believe that a lot of those dollars, again, were sent here for us to address the needs of those that were impacted negatively by COVID. And I just hope that we can do, because we never have enough money in housing and we never address enough of the issues, because we always run out of money and some folks never get service. So if we could focus on what we plan to do and how we can, use a lot of these dollars to address some of these issues, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agreed. Russ Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is my one question based on all that's been stated. Yes, we do have to track this budget with the ARPA dollars, but we've been having healthy discussion about equity. We need to make sure that we are equitably expensing these funds, addressing the needs throughout our community as well. What is our blueprint to make sure that we're making equitable investment throughout the city? I would imagine if we're addressing, since we're going into housing, I would imagine wards 2, wards 5, parts of wards 3, and parts of wards 9 may have some of the older housing. So maybe there's a heavier investment in those wards that we have to make sure of. But however we're expensing these budgets, do we have a template that we can go back and look at and say, wait a minute, we're making an inequitable investment in this way because we've invested too heavily in this part of the city and didn't put an equitable share in another part. So I'm just asking that as we look at being able to track our American Rescue Plan dollars, that we have a tool that we use to make sure that we're making equitable investment across the board with our regular budgetary dollars. I think that's crucial.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Let's go ahead. Thank you. Anything else, sir? You good? Okay, let's go ahead and go into our presentation at this time. Helen Tomic.
So as I mentioned a couple of times, most of this will come back to you when we look at the consolidated planning process. So right now what we're looking at is approximately $250,000 of CDBG funds for what I will refer to as acquisition or strategic acquisition of certain properties to remove blight and land assembly for nonprofits for future new housing construction. We're also looking at Chodo CDC housing, approximately $1 million. This would be matching funds to nonprofit entities as they move forward with housing projects. So a good example of this would be the I Promise housing, providing match dollars there, or looking at the San Tomaso housing that was built in Ward 1. We're looking at a demolition program. We've had a demolition program for several years. We are thinking that ARPA could be used for demolition. This would be for houses that are in such terrible condition that it's either invest $200,000 or $300,000 in them to rehab them, or demolish and potentially build new. Looking at partnering with our continuing partnership with Habitat for Humanity to continue the great work that they do. This would probably build about 4 or 5 houses in Akron. And then new construction financing. This was presented to you when we were looking at the housing portion. This is utilizing ARPA dollars, about $5 million in ARPA dollars to provide gap financing for new housing construction in certain City of Akron neighborhoods. So we're still working on the guidance, as Mr. Volman indicated. The final rule was just released on Friday. We are looking at utilizing some of these funds for new housing construction what that's going to look like, it's still up in the air. And then Councilman Fusco, you had indicated what increased the $10 million CDBG. This is a part of that. $5 million is attributed to that increase. Program implementation administration. This is a standard line item utilizing for paying for staff in a rehabilitation division, looking at our demolition division, long range planning, and development division. Public facilities and improvements. This is an ongoing commitment to look at designing, constructing public space improvements. We're still questioning the funding source on this. We think it could be ARPA eligible, but it is CDBG eligible, so we're going to have to go back and forth on that one. Neighborhood revitalization and sustainability. So this is where we're looking at a housing program, housing rehab program. $1.2 million of this is community development block grant funds, and this is something that has been in our budget for a couple of years. It is supporting the lead work that our rehabilitation division is doing. They received $4 million in a lead grant, I believe, at the end of 19. So the $1.2 million is used to offset some of the costs that are not lead eligible. And then we've also made a commitment to look at housing rehabilitation, potentially citywide, utilizing ARPA funds. So in 2022, we're looking at $3 million. And then there will also be commitments in 23 and 24 as well. Utility plumbing repairs. So we had a request. I mean, there's a lot of folks that have aging toilets, that are like 20 years old and increasing their water bills. So we're recommending in year one, $500,000 of ARPA funds to go in and replace plumbing fixtures that are leaking and thus decreasing their water bills. Fair housing, this is an annual commitment, a HUD requirement that we contract with an entity to provide us with fair housing activities. Homeless prevention. So this is part of the 2020 CARES Act. It is emergency shelter grant dollars. We must commit and spend that money by September of 2022. So we have two line items of CARES Act dollars, homeless shelter and homeless prevention. Homeless prevention is obviously prevent them from entering the homeless system. So providing with rental assistance, if they have to move, providing those resources, down payment assistance to help them with a security deposit and get them into a rental unit. Homeless shelter, all of our shelters have been bombarded with folks coming in and specifically meeting the COVID requirements. So they've been seeing significant increases. So we're providing up to $1.8 million of COVID ESG dollars to assist with that. Minor home repair program is our partnership with Rebuilding Together to provide emergency repairs for elderly homeowners, low-income elderly and handicapped homeowners. And what we traditionally do is we ask Rebuilding to hold about $50,000 of this in October and November. So as folks go in, start to turn their furnaces on, if they're not working or need repairs, we have funds available to assist with either replacement or repairs of their furnaces. Community Gardens is an annual program of Let's Grow Akron. I believe they are administering 12 community gardens for the city of Akron. And that's been a very successful program going on 15, 20 years now. Community services, this is an annual program looking at focusing on youth, seniors, infant mortality, and what am I missing there? Youth, seniors, and youth violence prevention. So it's an annual program that we look at that. And then Access Point Community Health Center, this was presented to council as part of the ARPA funding. So it's looking at some medical and dental and preventative health care services in certain areas. And I think that is it. Kind of flew through that one, so I apologize. But if you have any questions, we can go ahead with those.
I'm sure we will have some questions here. Linda Mobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all saw what happened in New York over the last couple of days. And, I know that we've had tenants to come down and complain about things not being done. Is there a way that we can look at using some of this money to advance, to get some of these repairs that we keep hearing about done, with understanding that these new players that are taking care of those housing facilities that we've been talking about lately, get these things done quicker, and so that people are not suffering longer, and that we don't end up having any serious situations to happen like happened in New York, because we know that there are lots of folks who are using space heaters that are probably not safe and doing all kinds of things during these winter months, where there's a way, and I'd like for us to think about this and not just blow it off completely. If there's a way that we can advance funds so that they can hire a larger crew of folks to address some of these issues, with understanding they're going to pay either this money back to us, or we can figure out a way that I know this money has to be expended by 2025, 26 or something like that, obligated before that. But, I'm still very concerned about people living in substandard housing and not being able to afford the repairs and things that they need to have happen. And there has to be a way that we can use some of these funds to help us address these concerns and stop putting things off and waiting for those owners. Because I understand after the meeting that we had was it last week or week before last, a lot of those tenants felt that the statements that were made in the meetings by some individuals were not true and did not accurately reflect what happened in those meetings. So I'm asking us to seriously think about how we can utilize some of these dollars now to upgrade some of these housing situations that we find ourselves in, with the understanding that we can figure out a way to get it either repaid, or somehow we can do something about those dollars. But the idea is to get those facilities upgraded and rehabbed faster. Thank you. And I know we probably need legal and everybody else to get involved, but there has to be a way to do this. I just can't believe that, knowing that we're trying to address the impact of COVID on people and understanding the conditions that we keep hearing about in those communities, that we can't use some of these dollars to advance the work. So I'd like for us to explore that.
I will just answer in terms of CDBG funds, and unfortunately, they are still like in the 70s. That's when the legislation was passed. We are prohibited from advancing CDBG funds.
No, I'm talking about ARPA dollars.
Okay.
Really,
Okay.
ARPA dollars. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda Mobian. I don't know who was first. So Russ Neal, just going to read them as I see them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'd like to do, looking at this here, is look at our capacity to perform. And talking to some folks that have come for aid, one of the first things I asked was if they've applied for lead dollars. They said, yes, they have, but they're on a waiting list and they're as far out as a year. So I'd like for us to have a real assessment of what our capacity is and look at who our community partners are and can be. I think of Mr. Chad Stone, who came down and shared with us that if he had ability to inspect homes before we tore them down, he could guarantee that he could rehab some of these homes. And we've known that there are plenty of stories where homes that were scheduled for demolition are now viable assets to the community, either with people living in them or they've become community homes And I'm thinking of the one on North Hill, right behind my shop, that the city wanted to tear down, but that community went in there and with the help of Perry Clark, gutted it down to the studs, and now it's a viable asset to the community. So I'd like for council to be intimately involved, because we know the different community partners within our wards, and have maybe a housing charrette where we can walk out of there with a blueprint that we understand who our partners are that can help us make this plan. It's nice to have this plan, but if we can't execute it, it doesn't do us any good. It will further frustrate people. And then my other thing is, looking at this, there's a piece before council right now that addresses one of these issues, and that is the demolition for housing. And this goes back to making sure that we have a group that vets these properties, because for every house that we can put into being repaired, that saves the city $10,000 to $15,000 right off the bat. So a true analysis of our capacity as it stands, looking at our community partners, folks like Mr. Chadstone and others that have come before us saying that they want to assist and help us address this housing issue, is something I'd like to see before we start expensing the dollars. Thanks you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Neal, for your comments. Tara Mosley?
Thank you. I have quite a few questions. Starting back where Councilman Neal spoke about with and Councilwoman Amobian about the lead paint abatement and the stockpile of individuals who've put in applications. Something that we may need to think about. I think that is one of those departments when we talk about someone doing 5 and 10 people's jobs. That's one of those departments that they definitely need to hire to help with some of that capacity. I have people who put in applications 3 years ago and nothing. And I don't want to put that on one person. I'm just saying there's a greater need than there are bodies in that office. And I think that we should think about what do we do to offset that. And we're just going to have to hire people. That means we have to, use some ARPA dollars or move some money around for hiring in that department. I think it would definitely help offset some of those concerns that residents have when it comes to if they. I think the hardest part about that is when someone puts the application and they wait a year, 2 years, just to be told in the third year that they don't qualify or they don't meet the requirements. I think that is where the disheartenment comes in and people think that they're just being, shuffled around. So if we could think about that. When we talk about the homeless prevention and there being $2 million and some change put over to there, when we talk about the homeless prevention, are we talking about overhead cost for those agencies, or are we really talking about helping people go from homelessness to having a place of their own? Because what I'm sort of hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, is a lot of these things seem like we're giving money to emergency shelter care, to maybe some of the haven arrest kind of facilities, but we're not really helping those individuals who need housing. And so that concerns me. If we're using it for overhead, if we're sending it to those different housing agencies, but there's actually not putting people in houses. And then when you have okay, go ahead, Helen.
No, it is for rent. And when we're not just looking at 1 month's rent, we're looking for several months' rent. So obviously you have to pay people to do this, but there is money going out towards paying people's rent for 3, 6, 9 months. And if you're hearing anything else, please let me know. But it is supposed to, and obviously there is a line item for homeless shelters. It's identified there,
right? Yeah,
because they have but the money is meant for security deposits, and there's and rental assistance for a longer period of time, and that is something that we have been pushing over and over and over again. So like I said, if you've heard something, it's not, please let me know and I will look into it. I
Okay.
do know there is, I mean, there is, we need more rental housing, but the agencies are supposed to help, not just, hey, we have this money available, but hey, why didn't you call landlord A, B, C, D, and E? The Continuum of Care has also just hired, maybe in the past 3 months, an individual whose primary job is to go out and establish relationships with landlords. Hey, we have a population we would like you to rent to. We have money for security deposits, and we have money for rent up to X amount of months. So I'm hoping that will help kind of clean up some of the backlog that's been possibly developed.
And so when we talk about backlog, when these funds are available to help with rent, are we talking about just the housing stock in Akron? So example, I have a homeless person who needs housing. Finding rentals right now, at least those that are affordable for people, is few far in between lately. So what if they find housing in Cuyahoga Falls or Barberton? Are we able to use funds if they find one that's not in the Akron municipality, or no?
So there's two pots of money. So the old traditional emergency solutions grant pot that we got, that's like $500,000 a year, that is restricted to Akron. The CARES Act money, I believe, I will verify, that is eligible countywide.
Okay.
And I will check on those regulations just to verify. And if there's some miscommunication between that and the agencies that are carrying these projects out for us, I will reach out to them and make that clarification.
Right. And if you could, Helen, I know this is going to be cumbersome for you to do, and I apologize. If you could give me a list of the agencies that we've given funding to homeless shelters last cycle.
I thought I gave that to you.
I looked for it. I couldn't find it. If you could re-forward it to me.
Yeah.
If you could, I just want to sort of kind of see who, because here's my concern. We have a lot of people who are living outside. Some of those are returning citizens. Some of those don't have glowing records. And so some of them aren't eligible to go into the haven of rest. But does that mean that they're ineligible for housing? I want to make sure that we're still, even if they're not eligible to be in the haven of rest, that we are still trying to help get people out of the code.
Yeah. Yep, I will, but I could have sworn I will resend that.
Okay.
The other, if they're sex offenders, that's a different category. But I think anything else, I mean, I don't think they should be looking at if they have, and I don't know my felonies, but the lower felonies, I don't think that should be a criteria.
Okay. And so on the minor home repair, I see there's $400,000 set aside for that. If we could talk before we pass this budget about increasing that, because even when we talk about having all these funds sitting over in the lead paint abatement section of housing and community services, and we know that there is a severe backlog that is not being addressed, maybe if we can move some of those funds over to minor home repairs, because one of the main calls I always get are from my elderly residents. And they want their porches painted. They want to be able to sit on their front porches. They may need windows. So maybe if we can increase over on that minor home repair, I think that would really help us to be able to weave through some of these issues that we may be having over in the lead abatement department until we can figure out how to push some of that paperwork. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we go back to the new construction financing? So I know we talked about, some of this will be do we have more details on sort of how this will be administered? So some of it will be grants to CDCs that will, create new housing projects, multi-unit structures. Some of it will be ostensibly for individuals for gap financing. What are do we have more direction on the structure of this?
We are still working those out.
We had an extreme, we had an extremely long meeting last week. We are still we are working through all of that. It's challenging, but those are the two primary areas I think that we're still looking at how to help, but getting the bricks and mortar of that together.
I will say, ARPA sounds great, but at the end of the day, these are still federal funds, and it's not as easy to allocate this as some would think. There are still some strings attached, and we're trying to work our way to make this as easy as possible for our residents as we possibly can. So yes, we did have a very long meeting. It was very interesting, but we're still working on some of those details. So Councilman Malik, I don't know if I answered your question, but we're heading in that direction.
Okay. No, I appreciate that it's an ongoing process, it's a moving target. Having read the interim rule, I get that it's a complex situation, right? I think again, it's just to the point that it is helpful in approving this stuff to have a little bit more clarity as to what's being approved. I think one thing we did talk about earlier was that this would all go towards affordable housing. Is that still the intention?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Going to the housing rehab. I think on the next slide.
Is it? Yes.
So I guess this this ties into a little bit of what Ms. Mosley and Ms. Mobians had, which is, $3 million for housing rehab, which I think is great. I think it's absolutely a great idea. But how will it be administered, right? Because, to the point that was made, often the issue that we have is capacity within the city, right? Mm-hmm. And so if hundreds of people are applying for reimbursements and grants and stuff like that, we can't just say this, now this person who was doing 2 jobs is now doing 4 jobs, right? So, has there been thought as to how the housing rehab program will be structured and how it will be administered and implemented?
So, yeah, we have had those conversations. We do recognize that we are going to have to seek partners in the community. We also recognize that we need to be mindful that these are federal dollars. They are subject to oversight. They are subject to overhead, to auditing. They're subject to the Inspector General coming out and looking at what we do. We have to be mindful of all of that. So we're trying to look, at a creative way to utilize our housing rehabilitation division that has, that they have to administer the lead program, and helping us do the work with our partners, and then making sure that work is done correctly. So we're trying to look at all of those different avenues and coming up with a program that's seamless for everyone, but at the same time meets all of the requirements that we're going to have to fulfill at the federal level and at the local level. Does that make sense?
I understand it. I guess the question that would raise would be, are we talking about adding capacity internally? Are we talking about having it administered externally? That would seem to be the question.
I think it would be both. But okay. Again, yeah, but we're still, look, and again, keeping in mind, this is, essentially a 5-year program too. So we're looking at what are all the options that would work for both the residents and making this as seamless as possible as well, but also on the administrative side and the implementation side as well.
Okay. And then I think the final point or comment or maybe perhaps question I have is, to the point that was made about rent quality of housing conditions in rental housing complexes, especially large complexes like Wilbeth Arlington and Erickson, right? I think one of the questions that is raised in my mind is like, what in this capital budget is addressing that as an issue? Because I think Councilman Holland has made this point before, that in some ways those two housing complexes are like a canary in the coal mine of a much broader issue of rental housing conditions in the city of Akron, right? And so I think it again speaks to, and so one, if someone can point to like specific things in here that are going to address that, I think that would be helpful. But I guess my broader point is that, if the answer is we need to hire 5 more people in our housing division to do inspections, then that's an answer. If the thing is that we're going to find ways to provide, funding, matching funding to improve housing conditions, to partner with private entities, that's another thing. But the things in here are good, but there is this kind of big thing over here that we've been talking about the last few months, that we've been talking about 2 complexes, but we could go out and find 10 more by the end of the evening. So how are we addressing that specific issue of rental housing conditions?
So to be quite honest with you, I mean, we have not, I'm not aware that we've had those conversations. But, one of the things we could get better at doing our inspections. The other thing is, I think that we should work with those owners and work with them in terms of seeking other funding sources as well. There are tax credits that are available for funding. And then perhaps if they get tax credits at the state level, and those tax credits are worth $3 or $4 million, and then they have a gap of $200,000 or $300,000 or $500,000, then I think that's where we can come in and work with them.
Thank you, Ms. Tomic. I definitely don't want to, wasn't trying to put to you, like, please give us a solution to rental housing conditions in the city of Akron. That's not fair to you. I think, but I would like us to, by the time we get to the end of this budget process, have an answer to how does this budget address conditions like what we're talking about at Erickson and Wilbeth Arlington. I think that's a fair thing.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Nancy Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilman Malik, for bringing up exactly what I wanted to talk about. And thank you, Ms. Tomic. My experiences with you have been that you're totally up to the thing that Councilman Malik just apologized to you for. You're a creative innovator and you come up with ideas just like that. So I love the tax credit idea. I guess in that whole vein, I'm interested in knowing on that very first heading, neighborhood revitalization and sustainability. I could give you my hot take on what that title means to me, but I'm interested in knowing what the administration, what meaning the administration gives to sustainability. Does it hold special meaning here? Or does it simply refer back to the idea of rehabbing older homes that are owner occupied? And then I've got some follow-up questions.
It would be rehabbing the older homes that are owner occupied.
Okay. One of the things that I keep sort of sitting on the edge of my seat through the whole ARPA process is my hope that I would see this word sustainability show up somewhere. The idea that that we can and should invest some real resources in principles and ideas and systems and things that will allow us to create a more sustainable, healthier, more stable future for Akron, for our kids, for our grandkids. And as it happens, revitalization, rehabilitation, reinvestment in our beautiful older home stock is just one of those things. I am concerned that we have this interesting tension between the need to assist owner occupants of these older homes, but also this competing interest in helping folks who are renters, who are in places that need help as well. Also sort of built into both issues is a problem that I think we see in a lot of ways, which is how will we reach the logical recipients of these kinds of programs? How will we get to them? And I hope that within the different budget provisions for these programs, we are consciously building in communications strategies and the costs that go with them. You know, broadband's going to get everywhere at some point, but I know from my own area and from the efforts of West Hill CDC that, you know, sometimes it really literally takes going door to door to reach the folks that need this help the most. They don't have smartphones. They don't have, you know, they don't have the ability to jump on the internet or the understanding of how it works, which kind of goes to something else that my colleagues, Councilwomen Amobian and Mosley bring up, which is this idea of waiting for the help. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I know we've all been down this road, but to wait, to be on a waiting list for 2 or 3 years for lead paint abatement is to literally risk babies and children suffering irreversible brain damage. That is more than enough exposure to permanently damage the developing brains of a baby or a toddler. And then the final thing I wanted to ask you about was the fair housing item. Would this be a $70,000 investment in the Akron Civil Rights Commission and its operations, or does this envision doing some sort of investment with Fair Housing Contact Service?
It's an agreement with Fair Housing Contact Service.
Okay. Any thoughts about making an investment for outreach, education, and enforcement with our Akron Civil Rights Commission within this part of the budget?
We can talk about, because this is the CDBG portion of the budget. So this is all going to come back to you.
Okay.
So if you would care to put those ideas in writing.
Happy to.
And then we can look at incorporating and looking at that as well. And I believe Councilwoman Samples also mentioned the minor home repair program and increasing that. I would also encourage that she put that in writing, and I apologize for not mentioning it before. She put that in writing, so then we have a record of it when we look at the CDBG consolidated plan process. We can reference and look at those.
Great, and that should go to you, Ms. Tomek?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. And any thoughts like that, please, if you could just CC the chair too. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I would encourage everyone, and anything and beyond, not just the community development block grant funds, but in light of the conversation that we've had tonight, if there's any question, if you want to elaborate on something, please put that in writing and then email it to us. And then we will hope, I don't know what the calendar looks like. I will hope to have everything back to you guys in writing by the 7th, on my dad's birthday, the 7th of February.
Thank you, Linda Mobian. We have a lot to go through. Just to let everybody know, there's quite a few more. We may have to reschedule for another time. It's not looking good right now. But Linda Mobian.
Well, then I won't hold you
Oh, no.
up.
I don't want to rush anybody, but I'm looking forward.
Right.
It's like, oh.
Yeah, the point I want to make is, I realize when you bring the capital budget to us, these are the recommendations from the administration. And I think what I like to see us do this time is to reprioritize some of these areas and look at the dollars that we are looking at in certain areas and reprioritize where we see the need, because I have, and many of my colleagues have talked about this housing issue, because a lot of folks, these new houses that we keep talking about, most can't afford a new house. And they are planning to stay in their old home, but they need help. And I think that needs to be high on the list of priorities. And we need to focus the budget that way. That it is a high need area that we see needing some serious attention. So thank you. And I will put my comments in writing to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Any other housing questions? Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and begin the miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first line item on here is our traditional equipment replacement program for Public Works. So this is going to be a breakout between about $1.2 million of issue $4 and $400,000 of debt. The $400,000 of debt is an annual amount that we issue to police, fire, and public works. And this is going to be used to replace outdated equipment for roadway maintenance and activities. Equipment replacement for police, 500,000 of GO, 400,000 of GO, 500 of issue $4. This is for the annual replacement of their police cars and or police SUVs. Two line items, I'm going to kind of put those together. Fire department is requesting replacement of engine 7 and ladder 9. And actually that should be coming to council on the 24th for approval. Both of those are issue $4. Specialty unit replacement. This is looking at a specialized vehicle for the technical rescue operations team. So this is something new that we're looking at, and that will be coming to council as well. Fire gear replacement. This is an annual program where we replace the big fire equipment that they use as they're going into their burning buildings. We actually invested quite a bit of money in 17 or 18. Each fireman now has 2 sets of gear, so this is just a constant replacement of that fire gear. The police Firecat system, the computer aided dispatch system. This is just an annual maintenance. Police and fire share this, so it's an annual maintenance program for that. Fire station debt service. So we've built 2 fire stations, Fire Station 2 and 4. So most of that was funded through issue $4, but we had to issue some debt for that. So this is annual debt payment for those 2 stations. Management software, hardware, and renewals. This is for fire. This is going through all of their software systems. It's an annual thing that we've been doing for a couple of years. Miscellaneous fire and EMS equipment replacement. So they have different needs, and instead of putting each and every line item, we've issued about $75,000, and this is for specific needs that they need for their fire trucks and their EMS operations. Vehicle refurbishment program is an annual program for fire. What they do is they take their ambulances and they look at refurbishing those vehicles, trying to prolong the life of those so they don't have to come in and purchase new ones every so often. So we also talked about vehicle replacement GO for police and fire. We also have for police and public works. We also have a line item in here for the fire department. And this is also looking at replacing some vehicles that they own. Miscellaneous other administration capital. This is basically paying for staff of the capital folks, long-range planning, that's responsible for putting together the capital budget and making sure that we are spending our resources as we had indicated that we would. Akron financial systems upgrade. So we upgraded to a new financial system for Banner is no longer the financial system that we're operating under. We implemented Workday on April 1st of 2021. This is a payment towards those upgrades. Debt service, about $39 billion. This is annual payments to our general obligation debt for previous capital projects. The Academy and Training Center, $600,000. This is for continued improvements for the APD training facility and to cover costs of the new classes that are coming in, and additionally, the Citizens Academy. Akron Safety Center, we are still looking at that. Police is choosing to set aside a little bit of their income tax 4 allocation towards the future construction and development of that Akron Safety Center. Axon body-worn camera contracts. This is an annual contract for the body-worn cameras, looking at the equipment licenses and evidence and storage of those whatever's recorded. The annual Axon Taser CEW contract. This is an annual contract paying for the utilization of the Taser devices. This is the 4th year of a 5-year contract. Management software, hardware, training implementation. This is for the police department, looking at new deployment of their METR equipment, the eSite, and some other software programming that's critical to the services that they provide. Police gear replacement. We talked about fire gear replacement. This is for the looking at their replacement of the SWAT tactical body armor, looking to replace about 8 sets a year, and then other needs for the SWAT team or other operational equipment. The police Firecat system, this is another annual thing that we utilize for the community aided dispatch. It's an annual contract. This is again a share between police and fire. Safety forces bond. We talked about debt that the fire department issued for their fire station. There is some minimal debt for the police side of the CAD system. Their share is much bigger, so they issued debt for that part of it in order to move forward. Miscellaneous traffic trees, downtown wayfinding. We are continuing our wayfinding efforts in downtown. We did receive a grant. So this is a combination of money from the city and also from the grant to implement this wayfinding program. Traffic miscellaneous. So traffic has come in with a number of requests in terms of signalization throughout the city. So this is part of their annual allocation for those implementation of different segments of the traffic department. Tree planting, this is an annual line item, looking at $450,000 of the sewer capital fund for their tree planting program. And this is also based on a commitment to replace 2 trees for each tree that is removed. Citywide tree removal and trimming, paying for removal of certain trees that are dead, and then trimming along some segments of the road where the trees are becoming overgrown. And the downtown beautification program, this is $20,000 for hanging baskets and plant baskets at the City Hall and at Charles Goodyear Park across the street.
Thank you, Helen. Let's go ahead.
I know whizzed through that one, so I apologize.
Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and ask if there's any questions reference to the miscellaneous piece, at least for the traffic and policing and fire. Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first question is with regard to police training. One of the things that we had discussed within the Reimagined Public Safety discussions was making sure that the roll call room had sufficient technology and equipment and video screens and things like that to be able to do short trainings for police during roll call. what's the status of that? Is any of that included in this? And that's the question.
So I'm going to defer to, is Captain McCosy on?
I am.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to answer that question. That project would fall under the stubs renovation projects that we have. So we have a small amount of funds that we set aside for that, for certain renovations here at the Stubbs building, and that would fall under that. We do have plans for continuing the improvements. As you know, we have some screens and some technology there now, and we'll be improving that over the course of the year. That is separate and apart from the academy and training aspect of it, though.
Thank you, Captain. Could you perhaps maybe send an email with some more details about what exactly those improvements are?
Certainly, as after we get through this process, then we will finalize those plans, and I'll be happy to provide you with more information.
Thank you, sir. The second question is about traffic safety. Last year, we allocated $155,000, I believe, with regard to speed tables for 28 speed tables in 14 locations. The supply chain issues that are beyond any of our control prevented us from putting those out in 2021. But I'm wondering, are there any additional investments in speeding reduction here in this capital budget as it stands right now?
There are not. We wanted to implement that first set and look and see how those are utilized before we look at it a second year.
I appreciate that, Ms. Tomic. I would speak for myself, but I hope I speak for some of my colleagues in that, I think that the 28 speed tables is good, but I don't want us to lose a year in terms of the progress we're making on this issue. And so if it's possible for us to allocate a little bit more money to purchase additional speed tables, say 28 more speed tables. And I think also look at some other forms of speeding reduction, like the digital indicators that show the speed. On places like Portage Path or Merriman Road, you can't see, you can't put a speed table, but you also see people speeding there. I was on when I did my Akron Marathon relay route this year, I had to take a school bus from San Run Park back downtown, and our school bus almost got hit by a car speeding on Merriman Road. And so anyways, I really just want us to elevate this, and for council, my hope is that we can consider adding some money to these efforts for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Tara Mosley.
Thank you. Just a few questions. On piggybacking off what Councilman Malik just referred to with the speed tables. Also, if we could think about within that context, maybe the lit stop signs, that definitely helps as well. When you go to other cities, those signs that light up on the stop signs are definitely helpful. And also the digital speeds signs as well. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. I had some put on North Street, and sometimes, unfortunately, you get those individuals who see it as a challenge to see how fast it'll say that they're going. But I guess to have them in the places where we know that we do have a lot of people doing rolling stops would definitely be helpful if we could think about how to incorporate that somewhere. Two other things. I noticed on here we talk about the academy and the training. I know that in our reimagining public safety, we dealt with personnel and culture, and we talked a lot about that educational pieces, individuals waiting to go into the academy and maybe being able to go to Stark State. I don't know if that would even fall into the capital budget where there's money set aside for that. Because I know as a city employee, you can go to Stark State for free. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that's in place. But how does that work if it's someone waiting to go into the academy? If there's money that is going to be set aside for that within this budget context or not?
Stomach?
I would have to check with the police department and we can get back to you.
Okay. And then my last question is on the wayfinding signage. Great idea. However, is it a possibility that we can have some of these wayfinding signs installed in secondary languages? We do have a growing community in North Hill. Some do not speak English, but they want to enjoy the activities within the city of Akron and downtown Akron as well. So if we could think about that and even further down the line, think about some of those signage. Fortunately, we may need to start in North Hill and work our way into downtown Akron, because some of those signs need to be in those secondary languages to help them be able to maneuver through our city. So if we could think about that, it shouldn't cost that much more, because I see them in all the other cities that I go to. But I think it's something that we need to think about.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support very much that idea of second and third languages for some of these wayfinding signs, particularly as a recent report has revealed that most of our very significant voting issues in the last federal election arose in precincts and voting locations that correspond with our newest North Hill neighbors. So let's think about really redoubling our efforts to be inclusive that way. The other thing I wanted to chime in about, we find tremendous value in those electronic speed monitors for the Bar District in Ward 1. It is very useful for summer weekends, just in terms of cooling things down for drivers who are approaching the square. So I'd like to join my colleagues in asking that we, shake out some coat pockets and let's increase the budget for things like that. Obviously, we all are crazy about speed tables. Not every location or situation is suitable for that. And I do hear the issue about supply chain, but those mobile electronic monitors are really, really a great and useful tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy Holland. Donnie Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to raise my concerns and support for us to really look at these speed indicator machines and speed humps. I think that's a great thing to bring up, Councilman Malik. I know it's been a long time since, and I was part of that discussion and legislation in regards to the speed indicator machines. And it's been a while. If I had to throw out a rough estimate, it's probably maybe 2013 or 14 when those were purchased. And I really would like us as a city and the administration to take a look at our inventory and potentially purchase additional speed indicator machines. I believe Lieutenant Decatur has retired. And I think, I don't know what the status of those machines are right now, but I really think we need to focus on moving forward with additional speed indicator machines to place in the neighborhoods. And also, Councilman Malik mentioned, 2021, we missed that opportunity for the speed hump program. And I would like to see us try to add additional speed humps, because I know the conversations I've had with a lot of the residents since that was first talked about is a positive move. And I don't want us to fall behind on the speeding issue in the city of Akron. So if we're able to try to see if we can find some funds for additional speed indicator machines, and even to move forward and move in a good, positive way with adding to our speed hump program. I would really like that. So that's all I have for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kamer. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to hold on my comments, but I'll make this real quick. What I've heard from my residents is the speed machines are nice, but when they're gone, they go back to speeding. So I'd like for us in this conversation to have a conversation with our police department about utilizing our reserve officers to run speed cameras. Because in my community, it's good why that little speed machine is there, but as soon as it's gone, people are back to business as usual. I think when we start hitting people with tickets, that's what's going to really change people's habits. So we need to have a conversation with how we can get a policy change within the police department where we can use some reserve officers, not have to pull officers off the street to be able to issue tickets.
Thank you, Mr. Neal, for your comments. I will tell everyone it's 6 o'clock right now, 6:05, but as long as everybody hangs with me, and especially if it's okay with Helen Tomic, we'll just soldier ahead, at least try to get through Parks and Recreation, and we'll have to perhaps, depending upon time, defer the rest of the budget, but we'll just keep on soldiering forward. Okay, Helen Tomic?
Sounds good.
All right, let's go ahead and begin Parks and Recreation. This
And-
probably won't generate any questions or comments, I'm sure, Helen.
So I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Ashley for the presentation. Jim?
Thank you, Helen. The parks budget of 25 million is 162% increase from the 2021 capital budget of 9.5. This contains over 15 million in ARPA funding and implements several major renovations to parks facilities over the next several years. The first project is the Akron Parks Challenge, 475,000 for design and construction of park improvements identified by the Akron Parks Collaborative through the Akron Parks Challenge. This will be the 5th year of the program. The photo shown is of the new nature play area at Elizabeth Park, which was a 2019 challenge winner. We anticipate the same schedule as in past years, with grant application process starting in April, with 2 parks being awarded in June. Court resurfacing. This is to begin $250,000 to begin an annual program to address basketball and tennis court resurfacing. Locations are to be determined. The Ed Davis Community Center is $1.1 million. It's one of 3 centers selected for phase 1 renovations under the 2021 Community Center Reinvestment Program. We hired prime consultants to conduct an extensive community center facility audit and public engagement. All 3 centers are in need of mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrades, as well as renovations to improve programming and function. Ed Davis design does include expansion of the gymnasium from an elementary-sized gym to a full-size gym. The last one on this page is the Firestone Park Splash Pad, $250,000 to design and construct a pad at Firestone Park, similar in size and design to those installed at Joy Park and Patterson Park. Next slide. Firestone Stadium Turf Field. It's a $1 million project, installation of artificial turf system for softball at Firestone Stadium. This includes renovations to the restroom and the roof repairs over the Summit County Softball Hall of Fame. We installed new netting and repaired stadium roof in 2021 and did try to begin to address the repairs needed over the Summit County Softball Hall of Fame. The following 2 projects are the continued design necessary for the removal of the Gorge Dam and protection of downstream infrastructure, including bridges and storm outfalls. The Gorge Dam removal is a $1.4 million, it's a carryover project from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant to manage the design and the removal of the concrete dam. Engineering is evaluating the structures in the dam pool to ensure they are stable when the dam is removed and the water level drops. The Gorge Dam contaminated sediments, $73,000 from ODNR. Continued design, US EPA grant for the removal of the contaminated sediments that have accumulated behind the dam. The City of Akron is providing the local share of this work by using these ODNR funds. And the Higher Park restrooms, $50,000 to renovate the concession and storage building restrooms. Next slide. Interbilt removal, $500,000 for removal of the unused pavement along the decommissioned section of State Route 59 to create less highway and more green space. Irrigation upgrade and miscellaneous improvements is $40,000. This is the upgrade and repair existing irrigation systems throughout the city. They're looking to automate and track usage, as well as having a local centralized center to make those decisions. And the following two projects are at Joy Park. Joy Park Playground is $75,000 to upgrade the tot and intermediate play equipment. The photo shown is of the existing intermediate play area. And the Joy Park walking path, $160,000 to construct the walking path within the 14+ acres of open space just north of the community center. And the Kaboom Playground, $200,000. This is our continued partnership with Kaboom for the construction of inclusive playgrounds throughout the city of Akron. This is a multi-year program. This slide includes a photo of the 2021 Kaboom build at Kerr Park. Since 2010, we have partnered with 6 playground installations. Okay, the next slide. Lane field soccer fields. This is the closeout charges. Removal of 2 baseball fields and regrading for soccer. This project is being performed by Parks Maintenance. Anticipate site being open for use in fall of 2022 or spring of 2023. The Little Cuyahoga River restoration and Lowhead dam removal is $550,000 project. Continued design to restore floodplain areas and remove 3 Lowhead dams to address channelization in the river and improve fish habitat. As shown on the slide, the floodplain restoration begins near Peck Road and heads south to Memorial Parkway, with dam removals taking place near East Market and River Street. We have construction scheduled for 2023 through 2025, total cost of approximately $4 million, which is all federally funded. Miscellaneous parks and community centers, $500,000. Small capital improvements at various parks and community centers. The increase includes roofing, windows, HVAC upgrades at community centers not currently in the first phase of our community center reinvestment program. We are working closely with building maintenance, parks maintenance, and recreation on identifying the projects. River City Heritage Trail, $250,000. Continued design of multi-use recreational trail that will utilize the 6-mile rail corridor. Phase 1 improvements marked with a star on this map include a trail and pedestrian bridge. $700,000 was awarded by AMETS for phase 1 construction. Phase 1 schematic package is now out for review. Construction is scheduled for 2024. Next slide. Schneider Park walking path, $160,000 project. This is a carryover from 2021. Design and construction of a walking path within Schneider Park. The length will be approximately a half mile to 3/4 miles in length. The park is 21 acres. We'll be looking to engage with the residents surrounding that park in the near future for the layout. Lot 3 vision plan, $4 million. Redevelopment of Lot 3 in accordance with the Olin Master Plan prepared at the Akron Civic Commons. This plan was presented to council in 2021. It builds on a concert event component and creates inviting family gathering space. $10 million total project cost with over $5 million raised to date. Patterson Park Community Center, a $2.5 million project. It's the second of our 3 centers selected for phase 1 renovations. Similar to Ed Davis in that the mechanical, electrical, plumbing will be upgraded as well as expansion to improve function and programming. Perkins Pool, $2.5 million we have budgeted this year. Reconstruction of Perkins Pool and rehabilitation of the bathhouse. Design is being performed by Branstetter Carroll based on their 2021 pool audit. Design elements include 0-depth entrance to accommodate all ages and abilities and offers discrete areas for different swimming activities, including climbing wall, water slide, and lap lanes. Total estimated cost is $5 million. The current plan is for 1 pool, Perkins or Reservoir, to begin reconstruction after the 2022 season and open in July of 2023. Then the second pool would follow the same schedule. Parks and public spaces, $50,000 for installation of additional security cameras at cities' parks, community centers, and great streets. Get to the next slide. Reservoir Park Community Center, $2.3 million. This is the final center identified in phase 1 renovations. Similar to the others, again, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing will be upgraded as well as expansion to improve programming and function. Reservoir Pool, $2.5 million, similar to Perkins Pool with the same design elements with the zero depth entrance, variety of swimming activities, and the total cost again is estimated at $5 million. And the final project is the Summit Lake Vision Plan, $4 million we have budgeted in 2022, which carries over from 2021. The plan was presented to council last year. The resident-driven improvements as part of the reimagining the Civic Commons in accordance with the Summit Lake Vision Plan. Focus will be on a loop trail and North Shore activity area. The goal is to transform the 36 acres along the North Shore into a destination with emphasis on equity and space. And that total project cost is $10 million.
I would just add to Mr. Ashley's comments in regards to Councilman Malik's questions about private funds. So for the Summit Lake Vision Plan, there was a donation, I believe, from the Knight Foundation. So that would account for some of the private funds. And then Kaboom also referenced private funds. So that is a fundraising effort in the community to help offset some of our costs. So having said that, Councilman Fusco, we're ready to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. One question I have is the that gorge dam removal, that's design only, right? The 1.4?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I have a problem hearing you sometimes.
No, that is correct.
Mr. Ashley, thank you very much for that. The other question is, I assume this is the appropriate time to ask this, but our the existing trail that runs through our city, the one that, you know, all the way from Cleveland to Zor, Ohio, the signage along there is really in a bad place. And I don't know if there's any plans to replace some of that or not. The maintenance, I believe, if I remember the agreement correctly, was on the maintenance is on the Metro Parks. So I don't know where that's at in terms of, but it might be worth pursuing and looking at because there's some problems. I don't know if anyone utilizes that trail, but it is, especially the signage is not in good condition. It's been around for a while, so just ask that you kind of like check into that if you could, Mr. Ashley.
Yeah, we're working on a new signage plan, evaluating all our current signage at our parks, community centers, and trails. So that would definitely be included, and that's also being studied for the Rubber City Heritage Trail.
Very good.
Appropriate signage for that.
All right, very good. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and choose. Well, Sharon Connor has not had a chance to ask many questions. So Sharon Connor, we'll have you go first. How's that? You're on mute though.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for Mr. Ashley. When you look at scheduling the pools to be done, is there any thought to doing the pool and the community center at Reservoir at the same time so that the park is literally only shut down for one season instead of multiple seasons? So
I believe that is being considered at this time.
Thank you. My only question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tara Mosley.
Thank you. Question about the Joy Park walking path. Joy Park is it's not a flat surface. So when I think about a walking path and 160,000, it doesn't seem feasible to me because Joy Park, of course, at one point it used to be baseball fields, but it's very, very hilly. So it seems like there should probably be a budget just for that part alone. It seems like it would be very costly to level Joy Park off to make it a walking path. And even if it's a walking path, I would feel more comfortable if there was lighting. It's great to have a walking path there, but what about the lighting aspect of it? And I think we need to have a conversation about that, what that would really look like. I don't want us to just say we're going to do it and not think about all the other variables that come along with that, because the field is just, it's not in the best shape for that. It would definitely have to be leveled off. And then my other issue is hoping, and I'm hopeful, that Mason Park will be done in time for the upcoming football season with the kids, because the Raiders in the Raiders football and cheerleaders use Joy Park while Mason Park is being completed. So if Mason's not done in time, and now they have to go back to Joy Park, but Joy Park is being renovated, where do those kids go? So I think that's something we need to think about, and really just think about $160,000 in a field that has historical challenges. I think we need to think about that. All for it, as long as it's done where it actually can be utilized by the residents in a safe way. I think is very important. Secondly, when we talk about Lock 3 vision plan and Summit Lake vision plan, I keep hearing vision plan. Is this meaning this is for the whole entire project to be done, or are we just talking about plans?
These are implementation dollars.
Okay, good. Okay, then that answers that. And my other question is on this, the security cameras in public park and public spaces. 50 grand does not seem like enough at all. I mean, that doesn't even seem like a drop in the bucket when we talk about putting security cameras in our parks and in our great streets areas. When I think about what we just passed to put cameras down by Akron U, but we're talking about only $50,000 for security cameras in our parks. I think we need to think about upping that budget. All for it. We absolutely need security cameras in our parks, especially with our kids there. I would actually like to see us put the emergency phones in our parks like they have on college campuses, just in case there's an emergency and you don't have a kid with a cell phone. But to say that we're only going to use 50,000, as many parks as we have in the city, I think we need to go back and revisit that number. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Yeah,
Ms.
that was,
Leslie.
that 50,000 would be, I know that would be programmed. That's just an annual program we're just starting up. But I agree that it's probably more funds that need to be allocated. Plus, we're kind of constrained on the, what the existing network is out there. If they need to increase the fiber that's in that area before we can actually install the cameras. Thank you. We'll take those notes down. And with the Joy Park right now, we were just trying to activate that northern area, and we were looking at working with Parks Maintenance on doing that. They've done a lot of regrading out there over the past 5 years. So we'd be putting in like a crushed limestone walkway. That way there isn't a real large, that number was just a placeholder for now. And, we'll work with, you and the residents out there to determine, but it was more of a low cost effort to try to activate that area. Now the softball fields and baseball fields are gone.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Very good. Thank you. Nancy Holland?
Thank you, Chairman Fusco. I believe that I saw kind of a general category for, it was not park and public spaces, but it was something like that for other needs relating to the, maybe it was miscellaneous parks and community centers. That was it. So what I'm wondering about in Ward 1 and specifically in West Hill, there is not a swing or a slide to be found. And my kids are big now, but I find this astonishing that from Maple Street all the way west to Portage Path, not a swing, not a slide, not a one. So this may not be the right time, but I am raising my hand just the same. And I'm interested in understanding whether that is the kind of need. That's not just a want. I really feel that's a need, especially as we all continue to live in a reality where we should be playing outside. Is that where that kind of expenditure would go?
Yeah, currently majority of the improvements that we're doing are rehab structures are no longer meet CSPC guidelines for ADA accessible. But we are looking at pockets in the city that currently do not have play areas to install them. That's one of our agreements with Kaboom. That's one thing that they're very passionate about. So we will be looking over this next year, identifying the areas and pockets in the city that do not offer recreational opportunities for children and implementing that. And this either that could be funded through the Kaboom program or other maybe smaller projects can be funded through this program.
Please remember West Hill in this process. This is so important. An opportunity for community meetings to happen while kids could be happily occupied. You know, this is how we change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy Helen. Shamus Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ashley, for all the information. I think there's a lot of great stuff in here. I'm glad we get to make these investments with ARPA in our public spaces, in our parks, in our community centers, in Lock 3. A couple specific questions. The Firestone Stadium turf fields, want to bracket this by saying that big fan of Firestone Stadium and the work that has been done by the city and by Joey Arrieta and others. What is the cost of specifically the turf, and are all of these improvements immediately necessary? Because this is a significant price tag.
The cost of the one turf right now, we're looking at doing just the main field, not the pony field. It's around $500,000, and then the other funds are set aside to address improvements to the stadium itself.
So what's the need to install turf as opposed to the current surface?
This came from the Recreation Bureau, reached out to us, and we talked with Parks Maintenance. This would allow that facility to be open for a much longer period, hold a lot more games for either teams or college events or high school events. Right now, there's a lot of maintenance involved in trying to keep those fields up. Obviously, with our weather here, we can get a whole tournament wiped out, with a bad day here. The drainage, been told you can get on this like within a half hour after heavy rain. The maintenance is, with the equipment, it's much more minimal, and it can be done by, you don't need a full-time staff person out there maintaining it at all times. So it's basically to get increased usage at the facility. Recreation has reached out, to the MAC for college and high school programs, Ohio High School Association, to see if they are in support of this, since they are users of this, and both are supportive of doing this.
Thank you. I think I recognize the validity of what you're saying. I think like a lot of events do get rained out. And so I think it's very interesting. I wonder whether, and we're glad to have the state softball tournament there at the stadium. I wonder if there's ability to have any support from OHSAA or any other entities, because again, it is a significant price tag.
For funding, yeah, we could reach out to them. I know timing of this, you have to try to get it done in a certain period, or you're going to lose that, the season. So that has to be done. I don't know if John Malish is on. He could explain more of the benefits and the long-term benefits of converting this to turf.
I don't want to drag on.
Oh, we could get that to you.
Yeah. The other question that I had, well, I guess I just have one other comment, which is, I know, we talked about this through ARPA. I'm glad we're making these infrastructure investments in Parks and Rec, but I think it's also important that we look at, increasing the actual programming and operations aspect as well. I recognize that ARPA, we want to make sure that these changes that we make are sustainable, but at the same time, Parks and Rec is an area where we see the capacity that we have, the human capacity is not as high as we'd like it to be. We want to be able to, offer more programming in a lot of our centers. So I hope we can find ways to do that in the other half of our budget that we'll see in the coming months. And then I did have one final question I remembered. I think Ms. Tomic, you mentioned that you're going to try to get answers to some of the questions by February 7th. I think given that this needs to be approved by the middle of February, a week later, I really would encourage that if we can get answers, to as many things in the next week or two, it would be helpful, because I think, this is a living document. This is something that, council is entitled to make adjustments to. And I think, we're going to need to have some of that information over things we asked today in order to consider the propriety of some of those changes. And if we don't get it until a week before the deadline, that's going to, present significant impediments to that process. So that's my comment there. But I will say, I appreciate the immense amount of work that's gone into this, the immense amount of information that's been shared today, the openness of all the staff in engaging with the dialogue and debate that we've had. So I'd say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Tara Mosley.
Final question. I don't know if this is for the city, or is it something that we would have to work in conjunction with Akron Public Schools? But as I look on here and I see that we're getting ready to take care of the soccer fields for the young people down at Lane Field, if we could think about a budget item for the track as well while we're down that way. I know it's something that's come up before, but while we're talking about Parks and Rec, if we could talk about resurfacing that track that is definitely being utilized by the community, it would be a great asset to add along with the fields down there. Thank you.
Very good. I'm going to recommend that we just go ahead and break here. It's 6:30, a half hour before our next meeting. And Helen, you and I can discuss moving forward how we're going to be able to get through all this. The one piece I'm thinking is the perhaps at our next meeting, not this coming Monday, but the following Monday, maybe we try to do like a 11 o'clock a.m. And so we can still get everything else in.
Well, typically water and sewer does not take the entire 2 hours.
Right.
So I'm hoping if we start at 4.
I don't want us to
Okay, we can talk about it.
feel pressed and hurried, to be honest with
Okay.
you. I want to make sure everyone's heard. So
Understood, yeah.
I was thinking about doing it in that way. So, but we could chat about that.
Okay.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and we'll adjourn at this time. And we'll see everybody in less than 30 minutes.
Can I just add one comment? So Councilman Malik requested, we try to get comments to you sooner rather than later, and we'll certainly try to answer as many as we can before February 7th. I have asked a couple of you to send us email requests just for records. I do have a staff person that took notes throughout this entire process, and I'm going to trust that she took very, very good notes. But having said that, if you feel compelled to put something in writing, or if there's something that was missed and you just kind of overlooked it or forgot to ask, we would ask if you can put as much of this as writing as possible, so we can make sure that we get a response to you in a timely manner and responding to the questions that you asked. Having said that, like I said, I think we got like 99% of what was asked, but I just want to touch base, and it would help greatly if we can get some things in writing as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Helen Tomic. With that, we're adjourned, and we'll see everybody at 7. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. We will stop our live stream now and be back at 7.